a soldier at war. I know you've seen my face before. I am red, white, and blue. I am black and brown and yellow too. I have killed and I have died, all alone and damaged deep inside. And the child I used to be was sacrificed for some insanity. Left the boy now half a man. My innocence was lost in a foreign land. Fought so hard and I fought so long. I fought for my country, right or wrong. In the eye of the slaughter, no star-spangled banner did I see. There is blood on the water, it's flowing like the blood inside of me. In smoke-filled rooms, the men of might will send your son somewhere to fight. And I am one of many more, just pawns in a holy war. In a field where the food used to grow, there's a murder of crows. Now the war is dead and gone, but the battle goes on and on. And the dream that used to be is buried so deep inside of me. I believed what I was told, but all that glitters is not gold. I still see my brother's hand. Why he died I'll never understand. I'm a soldier at war. I know you've seen my face before. Just a name and loaded gun. One more lost, forsaken son. I'm a soldier at war. I'm a soldier at war. I'm a soldier at war.
Hello, this is Dan Shea with Veterans for Peace Forum. Those were photos by Mike Hasty, also a member of Veterans for Peace, who was a medic in Vietnam and takes incredible pictures of veterans and protests throughout the country. So I'm really happy that he's given us those pictures to put up. I'm getting a little bit of feedback here, just to let you know. One of the things, today's program, usually this is about veterans issues, but I've invited some some people here today because oftentimes the words of veterans and our collective consciousness that's involved in a lot of various issues that all respond to war, oppression, and the way people are treated throughout is not heard by people in the general media. And so what's so important about cable access is that with cable access, we're also dealing with an idea of, like Metro East Community TV here, is to offer an alternative and to give voices of the average person an opportunity to tell their stories and what's important for people to hear. But there's, before I introduce my guests, I wanted to mention a couple of things. One thing is, just recently, of course, we went through Veterans Day, and with Veterans for Peace, we actually honored as Armistice Day. And Armistice Day was, after World War I, was the idea that there would be no more war. And so we feel that oftentimes dealing with the end of war was something they didn't want to talk about, so they renamed it to honor the veterans. Well, we honor those veterans that have served, but we want people to realize that we don't want more veterans to come back that are injured or there's war or the victims of war. So Armistice Day was an idea to honor peace. And so for us it was peace. The next day I was holding a benefit for post-traumatic stress, and we had a number of musicians, and I just wanted to thank them. George Mann, who I've worked with over the years, and you've heard me talk about him before. He's a singer-songwriter, came out of the labor movement, goes to various veterans' homes around the country and sings songs about this post-traumatic stress. We put together a CD called Until You Come Home with a number of different artists around the country, including Utah Phillips, who's, after he passed away, his family contributed one of his songs there. George was a good friend of Utah and comes out of that whole labor experience, but a lot of labor people were veterans that served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And so these experiences were put to song so that people they were attributing a sort of a tribute to veterans, but also to talk about post-traumatic stress. And the thing is, we put on the event, and it seems like today that most people have forgotten that the war exists, that there are people out there, because although we had George Mann, we had Adam Carpinelli, we had Mike Crenshaw and his spouse Jenna Lucy, who's also a great musician on her own. We had a number of different people there that played that evening, but only a few people showed up. So there wasn't, we didn't really raise any money. The awareness that we're trying to outreach didn't really outreach as far as we'd like, so that's why I'm talking about it now, so that you hear about it and understand. There's over 350,000 veterans with post-traumatic stress. That's 2006 figures, so that's continually increases. There's 350,000, nearly the same amount, of people with post-traumatic brain injury. That's very important for people to know and understand. Again, 2006. Just recently, there's been more and more talk about the increase in suicides. There's actually been more suicides than there have been people killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. So when we think about those things, we have to start paying attention to what's really happening in this world. Yes, we have, we got to make our car payment, we got to make our mortgage payment, we've got to find a job if we're out unemployed. But all these things are interrelated to the cost of war and the cost of oppression. And so these are the things that I wanted to bring out. I also want to say, if you want to find out more about that CD, it's called Until You Come Home CD. It's Songs for Veterans and Their Kin. And you can go to, it's up on the screen there, www.untilyoucomehome.com. Purchase a couple of these. Give them to a veteran friend of yours. Take it to a veteran home or take it to your family. Listen to those songs and the lyrics and understand how important it is for all of us to know what's going on. So with that, I'm glad I got that out, and I hope that's brought some awareness to you. Also, you can always hook up with Veterans for Peace, the national, or you can hook up with Veterans for Peace locally here, which is Veterans for Peace Chapter 72. And you can just go to vfp72.org to connect with us here. Again, my name is Dan Shea, and I'm with Veterans for Peace Chapter 72 here in Portland. We're also, I just want you to put on the calendar, we're planning to have the National Veterans for Peace Conference here Last year, last August, we just had it in Portland, Maine. This year we'll have it in Portland, Oregon, PSU in the first week of August. So, you know, stay tuned. We'll tell you more as closer we get. But we plan to have over 400 people from across the country coming. We're going to have some entertainers. We're going to have some workshops. And we'll have places open for the community also to be a participant. And with that, you know, I have been talking with some young people who are doing video and media, and we wish to do some workshops, and we're hoping to work with them here in the future. But I want to introduce Nat Needham and Tim Rice, both of who I've met through Portland Central American Solidarity Committee. And Nat went down on a peace and media conference down in Venezuela. What was that, just last year?
It's in 2009? 2009.
Yeah, it's hard to remember.
Yeah, the years just keep flying by. Yeah, we all went down, as I guess about 12 of us from Portland went down as a peace and media delegation to Caracas to meet with other local community organizations. On the ground there's some really interesting things that are happening in Venezuela with redistribution of media access to the general population. And we had a number of veterans actually come down with us to give a Winter Soldier hearing down in Caracas. Yeah.
That's right. And Tim, Tim, I've seen at Portland Central American Solidarity Committee on a number of things with CISPAS. You want to tell us a little bit about your background? You got involved with that?
Not CISPAS, but B Media before. There was a previous incarnation. B Media actually started in 2006 after a couple members went down for the World Social Forum. And they got this idea after coming back, seeing the great on the ground like media organizing going on there. The story I was told was that how the coup was turned back in 2002 was by the grassroots media movement, because all of the major stations in Venezuela were right-wing capitalists, like just saying like the president's an evil person, he has no support, we need to get rid of him. So the grassroots media movement turned back that coup. That was the way people found out about what was going on. And it had grown stronger at that point 4 years later, and like the people who went on the delegation were very inspired by that movement and wanted to bring those kind of ideas back here, and also create an exchange of material aid and money raised here to send to Venezuela for the media stations, like the radio station or the TV station, because they can't really afford equipment, but we can raise money here to buy equipment for them, and that we would take back the films that are created by, say, Calle Media, or the radio programs by Radio Negro Primero, and that we would distribute them here, distribute the ideas here, and help them distribute their ideas there by giving them equipment. So.
And I said I was going to ask a few questions outside the line here a little bit, and one of them is getting to know why people got involved in these projects, knowing their background. First of all, talking with you and learning about you a little bit, I know this is always hard. I mean, for me, excuse me, I'm sorry. For me, being a veteran, Vietnam War era, also having a child that was born with congenital heart disease and other abnormalities that later died in my arms, which was at the age of 3, was something that really inspired me. I mean, I sort of had an epiphany that that the war came back and took my child because of Agent Orange, and I'm now with having difficulties with post-traumatic stress and going through therapy, which I don't think ever can be cured, but it is something you can learn to live with. I think it's something that will never be cured unless we deal with prevention, and prevention is no war. Or it will do better without triggering these responses in veterans that have served in wars by not having any more wars. The other thing is that when I was talking to you and we were getting to know each other, you were in Thailand and you lost your father, right? Could you tell us a little bit about that and when that was?
Well, I guess I was in Thailand with my family in 2004. We were I was raised in Asia, and so we were gathering there for Christmas and New Year's. The Boxing Day tsunami happened, and things fell apart rather quickly. I guess the everyday things that people take for granted suddenly weren't there. There was no electricity, no way of communicating with people after this massive wave smashed into where we were. And I mean, it's a really long story. There's a lot of different things that went on for me emotionally, and just trying to realize the enormity of the scale of destruction that had just occurred while looking for loved ones and trying to help people that had been injured and were missing during the whole the few days that it was going on. But I think the thing that really came out of this whole experience for me was looking at my initial reaction of when the wave came. I was really trying to hold on to all of my Christmas presents and like possessions and things like that, and they were just getting washed out of the house. And it took me a couple minutes to really think, after I'd lost all of my stuff, about other people, and I wanted to, and I was actually really upset with myself for quite a while that I was focused on the material and not on the personal or like the people. And so I really spent a lot of time reflecting on where I fit in the world, and I think at the end of it, losing my father and some friends and stuff, I was really glad, given the circumstances, that this had been a natural disaster and not bombs being dropped on people or some form of violence from one person enacted on another. And so I think after all of this happened, I really started to get pretty... I was really upset with seeing all of the things that have continually been going on with occupations and wars and things like that, and have really wanted to become more involved in finding ways that we can work together and bring about more dialogue and discussion to bring action and I guess resistance to a lot of the things that are happening that are causing destruction in the world. Yeah.
Well, what first brought you to, how did you hook up with PCASK in a sense?
Well, I think my first run-in with PCASK was...
And let's tell them who PCASK is.
Oh, sorry. PCASK is the Portland Central American Solidarity Committee. I think all three of us here have been involved in it in various capacities at various points. And when I moved to Portland in 2007 after finishing college, I was looking around for places to get involved to do media things. I wanted to learn how to do proper video editing and stuff like that. And I ended up going to some B Media meetings, like the Bolivarian Media Exchange. I think that they were just organizing the Portland Grassroots Media Camp, which I think Tim can probably speak a little bit more to. And it seemed like a very open and welcoming organization, and it was a good way for me to sort of plug in and find out about what was going on in Portland and how we're linked with, I guess, struggles in Latin America and what we can do to try and change policies in the United States to make things better for people down there.
And how those struggles are actually informing us.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, yeah.
So, Tim, let's go to your background a little bit. How did you get involved besides just into B Media? I mean, did you come out of the labor movement? Was there something that led you here?
I've been a kind of radical, I guess, ever since high school, but I was never really an active participant, I guess, in like organizing until around 2006 when the May Day Immigrants General Strike happened.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
In 2006, I think maybe late 2005, early 2006, the Sensenbrenner bill, which was this very draconian anti-immigrant law, was passed in the U.S. House, basically making anyone a felon who assisted illegal immigrants in any way. And the immigrants community, especially like the Mexican and like Latin American immigrant communities in the United States, felt this was just insanely unjust. It did not pass the Senate. It had passed the House. So there was this period of time between when it could be enacted, passed by the House, then it would have to be voted on by the Senate and passed. So in that intermeeting time, about a 2-month period, this huge movement grew almost like wildfire. It started, I think, around March and built to this climax, which was on May 1st, 2006, which is actually kind of poetic in a way because May Day, which is not really known about or celebrated here in the United States, even though it's started in the United States, is the International Day of Worker Solidarity. And that this worker struggle was happening in conjunction with it was definitely a working class kind of movement, which is something that we haven't really seen in the United States in probably 70, at least a mass movement of people on the streets. So each one of these succeeding protests were growing bigger and bigger, and in certain cities like Los Angeles or places where there are large, especially Mexican immigrant communities, you'd see these marches of hundreds of thousands or millions of people. A lot of the places like Denver or Dallas would seem like by far the largest protest they'd ever seen, whereas they'd maybe seen a couple thousand before, they'd see like 500,000 people come out. And May Day was like the day of almost like a general strike, the closest thing the United States has seen of a general strike in probably since the 1930s, and probably around 5 million immigrants and their allies poured on the streets saying we're not taking this, and also at the same time kind of reclaiming the May Day holiday and bringing it back into the United States consciousness of the average person. So I've been a marginal participant in various things. I helped organize an anti-war march after the invasion in 2003. I was really inspired by Seattle and the movement that followed that, but I never quite made the leap into being involved in an organization until the lead up to May Day 2006, which we had a big coalition here in Portland with about 30 groups representing, maybe 30 people representing about 20 different community groups coming together in these large coalition meetings. And the people who were leading the meetings were almost all PCASC people, so it was a very easy transition once this huge climax of in Portland we had about 20,000, but like I said, LA had about 2 million people, Chicago had 750,000. So after that, the most logical conclusion for me was to move into PCASC and the work they were doing.
All right. Okay. Now that's very informative. I think that's interesting. Myself, even, when I came back from Vietnam, one of the things that was going on was the Central American conflicts, and PCASC was just getting started about that time, and there was Ben Linder who had gone down to Nicaragua to help put in a generator, create a little hydroelectric dam so that they could have generation for their hospital and this local little village. But he was eventually assassinated while he was there, and PCASC continued to grow, and we had a huge movement of people. I was inspired by veterans who had actually been going down to Venezuela, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, and there was a woman that came up here to Portland who was from Guatemala, and she talked about her experience of coming to the United States. And it was I don't know if you've seen the movie El Norte, and El Norte is the story of an immigrant coming through Mexico and having to go through all the coyotes and the oppression and rape and all kinds of stuff just to get here, and losing a family member along the way. These are the things that were happening to people, and I was hearing their stories directly, and it really had an effect on me. After losing my son, I understood even more so. I understood before, but I felt I had to be involved in these things. I was involved with the Sanctuary Coalition and Portland Central American Solidarity Committee in supporting those refugees that were coming here. When you talked about the immigrant community and the Sensenbrenner bill, right now we're dealing with Arizona with the 1070, mm-hmm. Another draconian legislation. And can you know anything about that? You talk a little bit about
the movement against it in Arizona. There's. I don't know
what the bill is.
I don't know the details specifically. It's very much. It sounds like it's kind of based off the Sensenbrenner bill in a way, and that it like tries to criminalize people for helping out immigrants. I don't know the details. I'm not the best person to ask
Well,
about
one of the
that,
things is they were profiling, that they were actually telling the police if they did not stop people on the streets and pick them up and question them if they looked like they were an immigrant, that the police could be then charged. I think that was taken out of the bill, but there's even an investigation, I think, in a lawsuit against Arizona on that right now. Many of the immigrants have actually starting to move out of Arizona, but it has that sort of rather than dealing with problems that exist on the border, now we're looking at even a militarization on the border, where we have drones. Here we're talking about drones in Afghanistan. We have drones along the border and more military operations there to hold people from coming across that border. But at the same time, they let corporations go back and forth.
And their money.
And their money and their capital. And nobody's really talking about the problems. So just thinking about that, and I was involved in the labor movement too, and I was telling you earlier that I just watched this incredible documentary called Harlem County, USA. It was a filmmaker, Barbara Koppel, who documented the Kentucky coal miners facing opposition during a 1973 strike. They had, there was Eastover Mining Company in Brookside, Kentucky. There was a guy, I was listening to him, and he just said something that struck me. He says, I had a boss man say one time, be sure you don't let that mule in a place where a rock might fall on him. And he says, well, he said, I was running, I was a mule driver at the time. He says, so what about me? And he says, well, I can always hire another worker, but I got to pay for that mule. And that was the attitude that these people had. But the film is an incredible stories about that strike and some 9 months of these people trying to get recognized because a Duke Power Company and his subsidiaries of Eastover actually refused to sign the contract. And it's just heartbreaking story as you listen to these things. There's another film out there, if people haven't seen it, called Matewan, which is also sort of a fiction show about by John Sayles that talks about the Pinkertons coming in a mining strike and people trying to organize in the union. These are all interesting films, documentaries, and that's what's so important again about film. So when we were talking, we went down to Venezuela. I was there the year before, and for me it was incredible to see what people were doing down there with media. And then the next year we worked. And that's what PCAST does. It tries to bring people together, each people that come back from those stories, tell their stories, and then help to send other people there so they can see for themselves, those people that are interested. Take that, though, and it's so powerful when you can videotape it.
Yeah.
And when you videotape it, it's not just you talking about it, you're showing it. You're able to show it. So you have a couple of clips here, right?
Yeah, I stayed down in Venezuela for 3 months, actually longer than the PCAST delegation that went down, and I ended up staying with a friend in a barrio in Caracas called La Vega, and it's basically an urban slum that gets running water once a week, and there's a lot of crime and problems there, but in these spaces, there are these amazing media cooperatives that are coming up, community gardens. People are really organizing out of necessity and are doing some really amazing things. And I just wanted to say a little something before we show this clip of a film that we worked on about Venezuela right now is going through some really interesting transitions in terms of public access to the electromagnetic broadcast spectrum. They have this program which they're trying to work on right now. It's basically splitting the broadcast spectrum up into thirds. So it's like 33% of the spectrum would be for private broadcasting, which would be your sort of corporate news channels and all of that stuff. A third would be state-sponsored media production, and the last is community-based. The last third is community-based access to to the airwaves, and it is really interesting because you look at the United States. I don't know the exact statistic, but it's somewhere around 95% of all the media that's produced here is private, is privately produced, and that really puts a monopoly on the ability for people to have a democratic voice in what's going on. And furthermore, there are all of these really cool studios around Caracas and in other cities and towns in Venezuela that the Venezuelan government has actually paid for, and they train people how to use the media, how to make media. There's a lot of young people that are involved in creating their own media, and it really has made this vibrant culture where people have, you know, a much more, well, a stronger narrative about themselves and where they fit in the broader picture of things. And we up here in the United States really don't have much of an idea of the level and extent that you know, a lot of countries in Latin America are really organizing to create a broader access to our messaging systems of the 21st century, I think. So I guess on that note, I was working with a friend, Amanda, who is also part of the B Media Collective. She's not here tonight. We had cameras in Caracas, and we decided, we were actually hanging out with a bunch of kids that were playing instruments on the metro in Caracas, and they kind of invited us along. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we started filming and decided that we were going to make a video about their process of becoming recognized as an official collective of musicians on the metro in Caracas, so that they could legally play music for a living in the metro. And I think the really interesting thing about this, among many of the things, is that it's a whole bunch of kids doing this, and they used the Venezuelan Constitution as justification for them to be allowed to actually play in the metro, because the Venezuelan Constitution, in its 300 and something articles, it's much bigger than the U.S. Constitution, has a lot of really interesting stipulations in it, such as, you know, food is a human right, housing is a human right, but they specifically used there's a clause that says that artists and makers of culture all have the right to make a livelihood in all areas in Venezuela, and they used this as their sort of justification for that. So, I don't know, I have a clip.
Okay, go ahead and roll that first clip, if you will, Jim.
Para la gente, tengan muy buenas tardes, ¿cómo están? Gracias, sean bienvenidos a este vagón cultural. Hay un colectivo de jóvenes haciendo música en el tren, estamos haciendo cultura, estamos haciendo rap. Espero que disfruten de esto que se llama El Arte de Rimar, ¿ok? Check it out, dice así. Yeah. Una vez más en el tranvía, primero que nada, permítame desearle buenos días. Lo que traigo es un fraude, ya no es buenos días, es muy buenas tardes. Así comienzo sin jefe ni jefa. Veo la chica que va para los jefas. Comienzo aquí en el tren. People represent it, you know what I said, man. Go. Y también la voz melódico. Saludo al cara que está leyendo el periódico. No soy metódico, somos campeones. Me refiero a la gorra de los leones. Este es Juanes, es de Venezuela. Saludo a la dama que me recuerda a mi abuela. Dulce como una ciruela. Métete con el santo, nunca con la vela. Yo lo canto, lo hago con cariño. Saludo a la madre que anda con el niño. De poco al niño, no es un tour. Si no tienes dinero, aceptamos el cambio. Míralo bien, eso es obvio. Saludo a la lady que anda con el novio. Mira mi pana, no sigas rompiendo normas. Ella es tu novia, te va a llevar la lona. Yo lo digo sin atropello, mientras la chica se acomoda el cabello. Tranquilo, men, es improvisado. Saludo a la dama que se viste de morado. Pasa quien con buena actitud, llegando a Agua Salud. El estilo lo tengo, no se equivoca, rapeo. No está tan grande para meterte en la boca el dedo. Yo creo que esto no es chalequeo. Mira, no te malandreo. Rápido, lento, lo hago deprisa. Comienzo a robar sonrisas. Yo lo canto estilo in the house. Veo a la chica con cartera de Mickey Mouse. Check it out, que ando con empeño. Y al panita de los sueños.
That was great. I'm glad we had people out there had a chance to see it. We couldn't hear it in a studio here, so I hope that you all had a good opportunity to hear what was going on. Could you tell us a little bit more about that clip?
Yeah, well, so providing that everyone heard what was going on, that clip was of a guy called Anthony and one of his friends, and he's a rapper. He's a kid from Caracas that, I mean, as you can see, is actually really quick with what he has to say.
Right.
And a lot of these young people are really interested in sort of hip hop culture, and they go down onto the trains and they rap about people that they see, the things that they see. It's all freestyle, and they're really, really quick.
For the older folks out there and older veterans out there that, you know, we listen to rock and roll, we listen to folk music, we listen to the old big band era. Tell them a little bit about what hip hop is versus, you know, they hear about rap music and there's sort of that gangster rap out there that people go, oh, I just can't stand that. But let's talk about what hip hop really is.
Well, I mean, I think that there's probably a lot of different people that think a lot of different things about hip hop, but the sort of hip hop that I think you're referring to and that I'm interested in is one that is more like socially oriented. It has its roots in, I think, music and neighborhoods like back in the 70s and probably early 80s coming together and trying to like address like social issues through talking about it, among other things. But
also, I think, I mean, it came right out of spoken word poetry.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of it's poetic, and yet it's delivering a critique on society.
It's really to the point. It can be like really biting, very
Right.
funny. You know, like any form of poetry, and it's got cool music to it usually.
And it's typically very simple, is why it's kind of become like one of the main expressions for people all over the world, especially like poor people. I mean, everywhere you can think of, like in like Southeast Asia or like Africa or like South America, like hip hop is like the youth, like
The urban youth
yeah, the urban youth kind of
language.
medium, if you will, a medium of choice, because it's simple. It's like people, it's like a beat and like people like saying their piece over that, and then like
Yeah. I guess also with, you know, we only have a couple clips today to show, but we've worked on a couple films down in Venezuela, and this specific one about the musicians in the metro covers a whole variety of different types of musicians. They've got like Venezuelan folk musicians, you know, rap, guitars, you know, they've got a harp on the metro that some guy comes and he makes a lot of, like a good living doing that. But there's another film that we worked on about this hip-hop collective called Tiuna El Fuerte, and it's a nucleus of endogenous cultural development, which is it's a Venezuelan concept for a collective of people, or, you know, sort of community organization that helps create culture as an orientation point for other collectives, other communities in their area to learn from. And these guys work with kids out in the barrio that they're right next to. A lot of, you know, kids from really poor backgrounds, and they train them how to you know, rhyme about well, you know, to kind of rap, and then to do graffiti art, and to MC and
Graffiti?
Yeah,
My
graffiti.
God, you mean that
That terrible stuff on the walls with that crazy aerosol stuff. But the really the cool thing that they do is, I mean, a lot of people see like rap and hip hop as something that is about, you know, bling and, you know, look at all my money, look at my house, look at my girls, all of that. And what these guys are doing down in Venezuela are really trying to teach the kids about a sort of socially conscious form of hip hop in their messaging, and graffiti as an art form, not as just something that defaces something. And everywhere you go down in Venezuela, there's graffiti everywhere. It's really different than walking around in Portland or anywhere else. Although there is graffiti here, and there's some really good stuff.
I wanted to interject here a little bit too. Is the idea, Tim? We were just talking about that video camp training. Talk about how B Media helps other people get involved, and what kind of training you guys have available to them.
There's been a kind of evolution. The first, like I was saying, there was a B Media before that was called the Boulevard Media Exchange. Was that idea of like the exchange between Latin America and the U.S. social movements. It kind of evolved in this large project called the Portland Grassroots Media Camp, which happened in the summer of 2007 and 2008. It was a free or very low cost by donation series of workshops on media trainings. The idea was we would get experienced media makers to come into this classroom setting and teach their skill to, we focused on people who are involved in social movements. So having the media makers teaching the social movement people how to do video or audio. I mean, we had tons of stuff. We had an acting, like kind of theater of the oppressed kind of thing. I mean, there was any kind of media you could think of as kind of what our goal was to cover that, not just like...
When we say terms like theater of the oppressed, you have to say to people out there what that means.
Okay,
can
well,
you explain that a little bit?
Not super well, but the idea of using how's it work?
Using
theater as like to tell people's struggles and like how they have their political development in the world, and like instead of like getting people to participate, each like normal person being part of a kind of acting scene and like telling about their struggles and
from their own perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the theater of the oppressed also came out of Latin America, and Pablo Freire came out with the issue pedagogy of the oppressed, and from that a number of these different ideas started
learning
happening.
from, it's like co-learning basically.
That's
the idea
right.
is that like it's not like the patriarchal like church or the schoolmaster telling you what you need to know, but that
It's like theater right in the streets. I mean, they were doing it in the revolutions and various student protests in Mexico and in Latin America under huge pressure from the government not to be doing these things, and they would inform people about what was actually happening through these sort of acts. I would even call it guerrilla theater in some ways. So these are very important. So then, as you go in, how do people get involved in B Media? There's a site to go to there.
So to kind of bridge it, so the PGMC was this thing that happened a couple years. It was really good. The original core of people couldn't quite hold it together. The idea with B Media is to try and pick that back up. The same idea of having these low-cost or free skill shares. We're working on that. We're kind of new. This core of people has been doing it about 6 months now. So the idea is that we would incorporate showing one of our films along with a training on something like maybe how to use a microphone or how to do some editing, how to use a camera. Plugging in right now is not the easiest, but if you contact us at the
website's up there.
Yeah, bmediacollective.org. There's all of the kind of like newsy kind of clips we have. We're kind of like a news service. We go out and film protests and other stuff. So that's what's mostly up there right now, but if you contact us with an idea of how you want to get involved, we are definitely looking for people to help us out in this process of kind of rebuilding the PGMC model, but also taking in different ways of also like producing stuff and like connecting people.
Another thing I like about what you guys are doing is that, I mean, we're going down to Latin America, a lot of it's in Espanol, and people here don't speak the language, and you guys are translating that and putting up subtitles, and vice versa, sending it back down there. And there was I talk about an exchange between Venezuela and here and the media. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think one of the really powerful things that I saw in Venezuela was this amazing media, these groups that have done some really daring and I guess inclusive pieces of media that have been shaped by like the kids that they trained how to make the films, or like street protests against like certain things that people have documented. They've done some really amazing pieces of media, and none of us up here see that. And so one of the things that we've really been wanting to help foster is an exchange of media, like Tim said, from down south up here, to show people up here that, you know, there's all these alternatives, there's a lot of things happening, and you're not going to see it on CNN or on Fox or any of these other cable news channels. But in that same process, in order to make it like a two-way street, we really want to be able to show people in Latin America that there is a lot more going on in the United States that is actively trying to divert, is in solidarity with the people in Latin America, is in solidarity with immigrants, is against U.S. imperialism, and that people really are trying to do things. Like America is always seen as like this sort of behemoth, like this huge country that, you know, is swallowing everything up and there's no way to stop it, and you don't catch anything in the mainstream media about things like the Republican National Convention or you know, the Olympic protests up in Canada. Like, I mean, there are people that are really trying to come up with alternatives and are organizing on many different levels, and we don't hear about that. And so it's the role, I think, of like independent media people, of people like us, or like you, to reflect on it, share on it, reflect on it, and we want to help. And so I mean, I speak a bit of Spanish. Some other people in the collective speak a lot more, and we try and get our stuff translated with subtitles so that people in Latin America can see what we're doing.
Now you have another little clip. We still have one. What's that?
Yeah. So, well, I guess one of the things that we all got involved in earlier I think in June, was organizing this, it was called the Cascadia Freedom Caravan. It was a bunch of people from Portland and Olympia and one or two from Seattle that drove out to Detroit, Michigan to participate in the Allied Media Conference and the U.S. Social Forum. And we made a little video about our reasons for going out there. We've got a tiny clip of that. And
well, we should just go ahead and roll it, and then
Yeah.
we can talk about it afterwards. We'll go ahead and roll that second clip.
There's 23 people on this caravan. 23. And one person's pregnant. So that makes like 24.
And a lot of us believe another world is possible and that we really want to crawl out of this pit of corporate-dominated everything.
times to Central America and to Cuba on a bus.
We are going on a cross-country extravaganza to the U.S. Social Forum.
I'm really excited to learn because lately I've been learning a lot about the problems that we face in this time of crisis, and I want to learn more about solutions.
Now is the time to organize, and as we've seen the inability of governments and corporations to be able to address this crisis, it's time to take matters into our own hands, and our group firmly believes in the power of everyday people to change those circumstances.
To be from Cascadia, to me, means sharing the same land, a lot of different climate zones, people moving, getting to know each other, a lot of friendliness and openness and welcoming.
it's the last person I saw on there was Rachel Townsend, and she is now in Honduras. Is that right, or she?
I believe that she's down in Honduras right now.
Yeah.
She's also being involved in a number of PCAST ventures and other things
She
as
actually
well.
took down some video equipment for the people to record down there and use. Can you talk a little bit about Honduras too, and just quickly?
Well, I mean, I'm by no means a Honduras expert, but I know that they had a coup in Honduras. Don't know who's behind it, but the U.S. State Department didn't categorically condemn it, which historically has meant that there has been some form of Big Brother intervention, not mentioning any names, in the events that occurred down there.
And then you want to talk a little bit about the technology and how this works now?
But so I think though that you know, just the things that have been happening in Honduras haven't been talked about except from independent media sources that have really gone out on a limb to bring the stories of what's happening. There's been like media blackouts have shut down all of the you know, like the radio stations and stuff. So I think people going down and or people from there producing their own media is a really powerful way to help you know, counteract governments and, you know, oppressive regimes from censoring people, which I think is really interesting. What I kind of wanted to talk about briefly was the idea of like technology these days being, I think that there is a big gap between people that have the means to afford a lot of technology, but the technology that is available is becoming, I think, cheaper and more accessible to more people, which really breaks the monopoly that the mainstream media has had on.
Democratizes the use of that information.
I think it was like, I think it was George Orwell that was writing at some point about the idea that revolution only becomes possible when the technology of the time becomes, I guess, accessible or democratically accessible to the masses. And I think he was writing about the Cold War. I think he coined the term Cold War actually because, you know, I don't think everyone can get nuclear weapons. But in terms of the media wars, I think a lot more people have access to computers and editing software and things like YouTube, which allows us to get our message out to millions of people. We don't have millions of viewers, but you know, and I think that this is a really important step forward towards hopefully breaking up some of the consolidation and monopoly that we have here of media in the United States. Yeah.
Well, I think that's really important. One of the things too is I want people to realize this program comes on, you know, the fourth Saturday of every month. Of course, December we actually will be, it won't be a live show, but we'll come back again in January and February and on. It's always, I think, important if you didn't happen to see the program here, you can, or your friends didn't happen to see it, they don't have cable, let them know that we'll try and get it up on YouTube, and we can send it out through, if people are interested, they can contact me directly, djshay@hotmail.com, and our producers will put that up on YouTube. Sometimes we run streaming. Tonight we weren't able to do that. We didn't have some people here, but we would like to have, try to have this program streaming more and more often so that people can see it all across the internet. And the more we can get these stories out to people, you guys are using a website and YouTube to get this information out. I'm finding a lot of great videos on YouTube that are educating me, you know, and so I think people need to learn how to use the social medias that are out there that can give them an opportunity to learn more. Is there anything that either of you would like to say to the viewers out there about getting involved, why this is important?
Maybe just like what we're kind of shooting for. We kind of have like some grand scheme ideas of how we want this collective to grow. We've kind of like seen like in fits and starts like pieces of what we want to do, but we're not quite there. But some of the things we want to do, we want to have like these interactive skill shares along with media screenings. We really want to be beyond that, beyond just being like a news source or like a training center. We kind of want to be able to like build a network of media makers and collectives. We'd like to travel around documenting the work of great collectives out there, be it in the United States or wherever, because we feel like especially going to the U.S. Social Forum, which is this huge collection of like organizers, like 20,000 organizers from all across the country. There's all these great groups that no one seems to know about, and like the way to like get that work promoted is to like document these groups and like show what they're doing. So that's something we want to do, and we'd like to, after we kind of establish ourselves and do what we've accomplished, we'd like to make it an idea that is replicatable, so that other groups can do it, because we ourselves are replicating our inspiration from the Venezuelan media movement, and if we can be kind of a bridge to bring those kind of ideas and that style of organizing here, that is what we want to accomplish.
Anything else you want to add?
Well, I think that Tim actually very articulately put what our sort of goals are. All I would say with media and activism and trying to get involved, I think it is a lot easier to do than it may seem. There's tons of resources on the internet that teach you how to use your equipment. If you have a camera or a computer, you can Google that, you can search it, and it will tell you pretty quickly what sort of processes you need to do on the more technical front. I think also that just on the internet and stuff, there's a lot of really inspiring stuff out there. I know that there's a lot of trash that you kind of have to wade through before you find the good stuff.
Unless they come directly to you.
Unless they come directly to us. You know, as we live in a sort of TV internet culture, finding the stuff that really deconstructs mainstream narratives and talks about gender and race and sort of oppressions.
Do you have a film coming up shortly?
Actually, yes, we do. We've got a film showing at PSU. It's on Monday from 1 to 3 in Smith 296, and on Tuesday night from 7 to 9 in Smith Union at PSU 294. The information is available on our website again, which is down there somewhere. Yeah, you can check it out.
If you see this and you visit our website and want to be informed about what we're doing next, like ask to be put on our announcement list, and we'll tell you about what's going on. There's a few more events coming up just this month, but then beyond that, what we will be doing.
Yeah. Well, and is that where you're generally holding the film series? Is that PSU, or do you?
Well, this specific film series is 3 films. The one on the musicians in the Metro, which we just saw, the Hip Hop Collective, and some stuff we made in Mexico.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you for being here. Thank you, and thanks again, Tim. I'm glad that you were here to give people an opportunity for alternative media.
Thank you, and also we like what you guys are doing, so keep it up.